Well, welcome to my first meeting actually doing the duties of the first vice president. I have the honor to introduce a visiting lecturer from our uh, colleagues across the Metro Detroit area. Gordon Hansen has a bachelor's in metallurgical engineering and a master's of business administration and spent 36 years in product engineering at Ford. As a paper boy in Brooklyn, New York in 1960, he won a cardboard tube Newtonian telescope on Wobbly Mount. He looked at the moon, he tried a couple of stars. He, in general, had less than stellar results. Uh, Fast forward 40 years to 2000, when Gordon got reacquainted and hooked on astronomy, when his niece insisted he take a telescope that was gathering dust in her bedroom. Uh, Now, a bunch of telescopes, a case of eyepieces, astro cameras, and a backyard dome observatory. All of that is now history. Gordon joined the Ford Amateur Astronomy Club in 2000, served multiple terms as president, vice president, and treasurer over the years, and continues to participate with the club's board. He became interested in astrophotography around 20 years ago. Gordon participated in the Ford Club's astrophotography special interest group, which has now transitioned into the Plymouth Astrophotography Club. He currently coordinates that group's in-person and online monthly meetings. All of that said, Gordon, thank you so much for talking to us, and take it away.
Great. Thank you very much for having me. Been a while since I've talked to the Warren Club, but I hadn't talked about anybody been at the Macomb Club meeting, and it dawned on me I never have. I've been at Cranbrook a couple of times, but never at this meeting. So this is a first for me. We want to talk a little bit about eyepieces. I think that's what the subject here is. So let me see if I can bring this up and do this without tripping on myself. Let's see. I've lost the share.
Should be down in the
Yeah,
bottom.
I know, but I moved things around and it broke my screen up into multiple pieces.
Ah,
So here. Okay, I don't think I'm sharing the right thing, am I?
we're seeing your Zoom window right now.
Yeah.
There we go. Eyepiece is what you need to know.
All right, let's see if we can pull the screen up here. How did that work?
Looks good.
All
Looks
right.
good.
We seem to stumble on these things. This thing got put together about a year ago, and I presented it at the Ford Club swap meet I guess it was last March. So, and it occurred to me that we spend a lot of time looking at telescopes and spending a lot of time trying to decide what kind of telescope to buy. And eyepieces, especially as beginners, we don't give much thought to. And I think in one of the introductions there, it says until you get to the first time you're out in the field with a bunch of other like astronomers and you see them walking around with cases full of eyepieces, and you're stuck with the two that came with your telescope, and you start figuring, well, what's going on here? So maybe we can unravel some of this and talk about how they work and why they work. So here's an eyepiece. And I don't think this is what we really thought we had in mind. I think this is more what we think of what this presentation should be about. And I put that in there as kind of a lame joke when I started putting this together. And then the more I got into it, I decided that putting that cross section of the eye was not all that out of whack. Because if you, when we get into this a little bit, you'll see that the eye is actually an integral part of this whole a chain of optics that we use to look at the night sky. So it really wasn't all that far out of place. So let's maybe I just thought we'd go back a little bit to the beginning and what eyepieces look like. This is Galileo's telescope. And, we talk about eyepieces and focal lengths and, 2 millimeters, 4 millimeters, up to 24, 35 millimeters. And you look at what Galileo had, and he had a minus 47 millimeter focal length eyepiece. That all boils down to it said that the image is actually formed on the other side of the lens instead of behind it. So it's a little bit different. The other piece of this is that its apparent field of view is only 15 arc minutes. Then, as we're going to see a little bit later, you got to give him more and more credit because he was literally looking through a straw at the sky. It's basically what it boiled down to. So let's dig into the meat here and why the eye becomes an important part of what our telescope system. What we've got here now is any telescope. What's on here is just a simple refractor, and then an eyepiece, and then obviously it's not going to do any much until you get your eye involved in it. But let's a little bit what's going on here. If you look at the light that's coming in from a star, say on the center of your field of view, there's a collimated beam of light that comes into the telescope that gets focused down to a point in the case of a star, and that occurs where the field stop is inside the barrel of the eyepiece. And we'll get a little bit more into some of this, but just to try and set the stage. So typically, after the field stop, you wind up with several pieces of glass. And what that glass is doing is it takes that cone of light, it comes to a point at the focal point of the telescope and then starts spreading out again. And the eyepiece takes it and recollimates it, and then passes it through, and those, what I'm going to call pencil beams of light, all come together just inside your eye, typically just around the iris, and then the lens in your eye refocuses them down to the back of your retina. Now, one of the things that struck me right away here, we talk about the telescope being a light bucket, and then we grab if you got a 100 millimeter telescope, we're getting capturing all the light that can fall inside that 100 millimeter diameter lens, and we're now trying to get it inside of our eyes, and that's what the telescope is trying to do. It takes that collimated wide beam and shrinks it down so that essentially what the exit pupil was now get inside your eye. So the eye becomes obviously an integral part of what we're trying to use with our telescopes. Now, one thing we need to look at here is that field stop really sets up what the apparent field of view of that eyepiece is going to be able to give you. And obviously, the bigger the diameter of the eyepiece, the further apart that field stop can be, and the apparent field of view can grow. So that's just one thing to kind of keep in mind here when we start looking at eyepiece designs. There's a lot of writing here, but I get a kick out of this, and I thought I'm going to read it anyway. Design considerations. It says that the ideal eyepiece is succinctly defined as crisp, wide, flat, bright, dark, comfortable, durable, and affordable. This means the eyepiece must produce an image with minimal or no aberrations within the range of objective focal ratios it is designed to magnify, display a wide field without perceptible curvature or distortion, transmit almost all light from the image without ghost, glare, or scatter, provide enough eye relief for comfortable viewing, withstand years of normal use, environmental exposure, and the occasional accident, aka dropping it on the ground, without affecting any of the previous qualities, and be offered new at an affordable price. I think that pretty much is anything we could ever ask for out of any piece of equipment. Now, how well some of the eyepieces do that, I guess that's the next question. So, by the way, if anybody's got questions anywhere along here, just shout out, and I'll and we'll stop and take questions as we go. So,
Good.
what do we care about when we're looking at an eyepiece? What are the specs we're interested in? And maybe the first thing is how big the eyepiece is. Some of us have been around for a few years. Remember when almost a standard eyepiece was what was a 0.965-inch barrel. You hardly see telescopes made today that will call for that kind of an eyepiece. But if you into vintage telescopes, things built back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, you'll find that their focusers and everything are set up for 0.965. So obviously, the size of the barrel of the eyepiece is one of the specs we need to pay attention to. 1¼ inch and 2 inch are probably the most common today. I guess the 3 inches and bigger are used on professional telescopes. I don't know if professional telescopes ever use eyepieces anymore, but I guess they're out there. Obviously, depending on your scope, if you've got a relatively small scope and it's only got a 1¼ inch focuser, going shopping for a 2-inch eyepiece is it's not going to work. Now, the bigger focusers will allow 2-inch, 1¼ 2-inch, or maybe even bigger eyepieces. So that's obviously something you need to take into account. But the other thing that starts happening here is that the bigger the diameter of the eyepiece, it starts to increase in weight. And just for instance here, on the right here is we've got an old 9.925. I think this was a Kellner. I can't read it anymore. It only weighed 1.4 ounces. The University Optics ortho there, that's a little over 2 ounces, and a 35 millimeter Teleview Panoptic that comes in at a nice 1 pound 9 ounces. When I put that's my lens, and I put it on my 10-inch Dob, I need to put counterweights on the thing because it's going to pull it to the ground. It's not, thing isn't designed for that kind of weight. So that's obviously a consideration when we're looking at eyepieces. Now, most of us, I think, are kind of aware of this, that the magnification that we see out of our telescope is calculated pretty easily by taking the focal length of the telescope divided by the focal length of the eyepiece. So small focal length, short focal length eyepieces give you the greatest magnification, and obviously long focal lengths give you lower magnification. Some things to consider, that the rule of thumb is that the absolute maximum usable magnification out of a scope is 50 times the aperture of the telescope in inches. If you want to do it in millimeters, it's twice. We're never going to see 50 times that here in Michigan. This may be for the Atacama Desert when you're at 10,000 feet. I think we'd be lucky to see 25x here in Michigan, even on the best nights. As seeing deteriorates, we get more and more air currents and things, that magnification usefulness goes down. So going out there and trying to find a 2 millimeter eyepiece is going to give you, so you can get the 500x or something, is going to be a losing game here, especially in Michigan. Now, maybe some other things that we don't consider right off the bat. Eye relief. Eye relief is where the telescope comes to focus as a distance from the last surface of the eyepiece. And it occurs where, we got a pencil beam of light from a let's say a star that's on a center line, and then we've got one that's at the edge of the field of view. Where those beams come together, that defines essentially where the eye relief is, and it typically occurs inside the eye, past the just before the iris of the eye. So that eye relief becomes important, especially if you're wearing glasses while you're viewing, because you can't, if you don't have enough eye relief, and one of the recommendations here is something greater than 17 millimeters if you're wearing glasses, that you can't get close enough to the eyepiece to see everything.
Gordon,
Yes.
Some people are having trouble hearing you. Is there anything you can do to?
Oh, I'm sorry. Is that any better? I'm trying to get closer to the.
That's
How's
somewhat
that?
better.
Is that any better?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Um, some other things. I'm sorry. Would somebody say something?
Oh yeah, there's just Mark that you accidentally put on your slide.
Okay. If you're, especially here in Michigan, especially this time of year, if the eye relief of the eyepiece is too short, when you forget the glasses now, and you bring your eye up close, the moisture from the lens is going to start condensing on the cold of the glass of the eyepiece. So long eye relief has a benefit not only from if you're wearing glasses, but it also keeps your eye further away from the glass so that you don't frost up your eyepieces right away. And just a kind of a rule of thumb is that the eye relief of the eyepiece gets shorter as the eyepiece focal length decreases. So, you know, a 4 mm eyepiece, you're going to have your eye pretty darn close to that glass when you're looking through it. So, just things you need to consider, especially when in cold environments. Now, the next piece there is what's called the exit pupil. And it's the diameter of that collimated pencil beam of light that comes out of the eyepiece. It can be calculated if you want by looking at the focal length of the eyepiece divided by the F number of the telescope, or doing a little bit of algebra there. That's the aperture of the scope divided by its magnification. And this becomes important because the whole point here is we're trying to get the light from the telescope through the system and into your eye. And if the exit pupil exceeds the diameter of your dilated eye, then you're throwing light away. And in this case, the average young adult kid can get a fully dark adapted eye will open up to about 7 mm. Obviously, that varies from person to person. But as we get older, this maximum starts to decrease. And just an example here, with my 10-inch Dob, which is at f4.5 with that 35 mm panoptic, the exit pupil is 7.8 mm. And at my mature age, I certainly don't ever get my eyes opening up above anywhere near 7.8 millimeters. And just another fact here, I'm not sure you can do much with it, but a piece of information is that if the exit pupil is actually really down below 2 millimeters, then your whole eye becomes diffraction limited. You'll get a whole lot better views, and things like astigmatism are not going to be all that important. Above 2 millimeters, then the aberrations in your eye, whatever, start to become important. And here, just to kind of belabor the point a little bit more, the graph at the left is the typical eye pupil size in millimeters as a function of the age of the observer. And you can see I've exceeded that 60 number, and I think for this it says I ought to give up. But we keep going. It also, and again, talking about the effect of the size of the beam as a function of aberrations in your eye, if you've got astigmatism in this case, as the amount of astigmatism increases, it becomes more and more important as the exit pupil size. Even at small exit pupils, you can wind up with issues. Teleview is attempted to come after this with their eyepieces by they'll sell what they call a dioptric, which is lays on top of their eyepieces, and you can adjust this now for the astigmatism in your eye, so you can correct for it without and not wear your glasses. Okay, now apparent field of view versus true field of view. We buy an eyepiece and you'll see all the specs and plossels are somewhere around 50-degree apparent field of view. And as we start moving up, Naglers are at 80 degrees. And now we get the latest generation that are up at 100-degree apparent field of view. They take those eyepieces and now come back and say, how much of the sky am I actually seeing? Is, a rule, quick and dirty, is to take the apparent field of view divided by the magnification in your rig, and that'll give you the true field of view. And just to kind of give you a feel for what all that means at the telescope, let's go back to the beginning and take Galileo's minus 47.5 millimeter eyepiece on his telescope, and he had an apparent field of view of 6.5 degrees, and this is the view that he would have seen of this part of the sky. If we now go in and throw in an Abbey design eyepiece, 25 millimeter with an apparent field of view of 45, this is the view you get. If we go to a Plossel, apparent field of view of 50 degrees, this is the view. A Panoptic at 68 degrees, we get this. The Nagler at 82 degrees, we get this. And if we go to, in this case, an Explorer Scientific at 100 degrees, this is the view we get. So we've got to see more and more of the sky as at the same relative magnification. Now, problem here is we're going to talk a little bit about this comes at a price, and that price is price. We'll talk about that a little bit in a few more seconds. But just to cover the waterfront here a little bit, there are zoom eyepieces out that you can now, instead of having a collection of eyepieces, you can put one eyepiece in and click some wheels and get some different magnifications. Always can come in handy. Specialty eyepieces, and I'm throwing in Barlow's and Powermates into this category. They may not be the eyepiece itself, but they certainly can add to the collection, so to speak. That if I put a 24 millimeter eyepiece in and stick it into a 2X Barlow, it's like having a 12X eyepiece, a 12 millimeter eyepiece. You should know that if you look at a family of eyepieces from manufacturers, that's exactly what they do. They'll have a 24 millimeter eyepiece design, and they'll put a 2X Barlow inside the glass, and then they have a 12, and they sell another eyepiece at 12 millimeters. Don't be afraid of using high quality either Barlows or Powermates. They can be just a whole lot more cost effective than going out and buying a whole slew of different eyepieces. And obviously at the bottom here, there's some specialty things with illuminated reticles. If you're doing double star work and you're trying to get the orientation of the two stars and trying to get their spacing, there's a whole slew of tools that you can use for that. Now, just to kind of look back, and I thought this was interesting. This was from the 1944 edition of Sky and Telescope. They're saying that eyepieces are commercially available, but not in any particular profusion of types or focal lengths, and not always easily procured. And compare that to this I found on the web. So I assume this is some guy's collection of eyepieces. So we've come from where it was hard to find them in the stores or any place. They're out there by the scores almost. Now, another thing you need to start paying attention to is the term parafocal. If I've got a series of eyepieces, let's say they're all from the same manufacturer, where do they come into focus when I put them into the telescope? If they're quote unquote parafocal, that means that you're not going to have to be changing the focal position by very much. On the other hand, if you've got, I think there's a blue dot here. I don't know, is my cursor showing up here? If you've got a telescope that's represented by this blue dot down in the bottom left and another eyepiece out here at the top right, and you want to switch between these eyepieces, you're going to be doing a lot of cranking on your focuser to get from one place to the other. And that can be pretty inconvenient. You can see that there's a whole series of places where they're almost in line with one another. And my from this data source, I'm assuming that these are all from, each group was from a manufacturer that was keeping their eyepieces reasonably parafocal. You need to be an optician to understand maybe a lot of this stuff, and that's above my pay grade. But just to show you what's going on inside these eyepieces, that negative lens, which was what Galileo was playing with, the field stop was out in front of the lens, but the focal point was up front. And not the best of circumstances. And then as things progressed, you came up with a single convex lens. And then Huygens eyepieces that added more lens. And you can see as time went on, we added more and more glass to these eyepieces. And so you see Kellner's, and then we see Plossels, and here in that second row, which is became pretty ubiquitous. And typically the eyepiece that they give you when you buy a starter telescope. Then there's orthoscopics, and there's a thing called a monocentric eyepiece. I don't think I've ever seen one of these. There looks like some pretty hefty pieces of glass in one chunk. And then these Erfels and the Koenigs and RKEs, and finally Nagler Type 2s, and you can see the number of pieces of glass, and why the prices of these things can be start to rise. There's a lot of work going on. Now, what do you get for all those pieces of glass? Just like with a telescope, if you've got a two-element telescope refractor, you're going to wind up with some color errors. You're going to wind up with chromatic distortion, and that happens with eyepieces also. So those two-element eyepieces, the Ramsdens and Huygens, that they were popular 50 years, 60 years ago, but they're going to give you color problems. So you're really trying to avoid those. The Kellners went to 3 elements, and they bring the red and blue typically to focus at the same place, but the green is focusing someplace else. So again, you're going to have a little bit of color problems with them. The 4-element orthoscopic and Plossels finally get it right and bring things so that color chromatic aberration isn't a big deal with them. Then the thing starts becoming, well, we go to get more glass and we start getting more wider field of view. And as we saw with those Naglers at 82 degrees, there is a whole lot of glass in there to get up to those 82. I don't know what's the inside of the 100-degree ones. Again, just another thing showing the kind of glass that can be inside these eyepieces. Now, what are the other things that come about because of all those pieces of glass? It's a basic law of physics, so to speak, is that every time you have an air-glass interaction, you're going to get a reflection at that air-glass surface, and it's typically around 4%. So for every air-glass interface there is in an eyepiece, you're going to wind up losing 4% of the light. So if you have a Plossel with 4 of those interactions, you're down to 85% transmission of light. The Naglers have 10, which said we'd only get 60% transmission. And along with that loss of light, those reflections are bouncing inside the barrel of the eyepiece, and they're causing all kinds of internal reflections and ghost images and glare. So how do they fix that? And the question then becomes, they start putting coatings on the glass, and those glasses cut down or eliminate those reflections. And this is where you got to start paying attention to what the manufacturer is saying about those eyepieces. They'll come out and say, well, we have a coated glass. Well, that typically means they put a coating on one layer at the air glass surface. So the rest of the things have no coatings. Not the greatest situation. More of a marketing scam. Fully coated says, well, I put something on every air glass surface, and that's a little bit better. But remember, these coatings tend to be wavelength sensitive, so that you may get good cut down a reflection at one wavelength, but other wavelengths may be reflecting. And the way to get at that is to go to multi-coated glass coatings, and each of the layers now are attacking different wavelengths or frequencies of light, so that we get rid of those reflections. And then finally, the best of all worlds is what they call a fully multi-coated, where that you have at least one or more layers of coating on all air glass surfaces, and that's what you're starting to pay for when you go to the higher end eyepieces. You're not, and you're also typically getting better polishing, better attention to the geometry of the lenses. Again, the defects that they're trying to light loss, spatial distribution, reflections, loss of contrast. That's all the stuff that can go wrong if you're not paying attention to when the manufacturer and the coatings put on these lens elements. Okay, so what kind of eyepieces do we want to look at if we're looking in the sky? If we're looking at deep space things, or the Orion Nebula, Andromeda Galaxy, we want a wide field of view, and that's where those low power wide field eyepieces can come into place. Again, deep space globular and open clusters, where we want maybe not quite as much field of view, but we want something better than I'm adjusting here 25 to 100 arc minutes. Going after double stars, now we're not really looking for a whole lot of field of view. What we want now is we want to get the light through. If we got a really dim secondary in orbit around a brighter primary star, we want to be able to detect the lower higher magnitude star in the image, and that means getting light through. So that may mean less glass. We're doing planetary nebula and planets. We may want a lot higher power. For lunar and solar, we don't need a whole lot of magnification, so low power. So you have to kind of customize and look at your eyepiece collection for what you actually want to observe. And again, just another look at what
I used to think Obama was the best president ever.
Barack Obama got his BA from Columbia, his JD from Harvard. He taught for a number
Oh, your feed, man. Thanks.
Okay, I wanted. All right, so again. This is from Nagler, and he's comparing their 26 millimeter Plössl with a 50-degree apparent field of view, and what you'll see through the eyepiece, compared to putting their 13 millimeter ethos with a 100-degree apparent field of view, and you obviously can see a whole lot more magnification, but still seeing the same field of view. And the trade-off there is we go from a Plössl down to their ethos, and the money just keeps on growing. And just to add impetus to that, I downloaded this about a week or so ago from Teleview's Eyepiece page, and if you look at their 25 millimeter Plössl are advertising a retail price of $138. And if you want their 21 millimeter ethos, you're talking a little over $1,000. So yes, those 100-degree field of views can become very attractive, and they give you startling uh, views, and almost like you can't see the edge of the field, and it can be pretty amazing. But to do that, you're gonna be spending some bucks, and not to be just a pick on Nagler here or Pelview. Here's some Explorer Scientific in their lineup, and it's the same kind of pricing. Their 100-degree eyepieces are up there around $1,000, while the Apostles are down in the $100 region. So you can get more view from things, but it's going to come at the price, and the price starts becoming what you got to pay for them, the weight of the eyepiece, and again, you got to keep in mind what the eye relief is. You can see some of these, a 12.5 millimeter Orion Apostle has only got an 8 millimeter eye relief. And I thought we had I guess I don't have it on here. See the Explorer Scientific's longer, we're getting out to 20 millimeters, but you're going to pay a lot more money for them. Again, if you want to dig in more, go to Telview's Eyepiece. He's got Nagler does a good job in explaining design, what's going on in eyepiece design. And obviously there's always cloudy nights. There's been a lot of reviews out there. So that's my story. So any questions or?
I have a big question for you, Gordon.
Go ahead.
So, quite a few of the eyepieces that you cited, and quite a few of the ones in my own collection, are Orion manufactured Sirius eyepieces. Orion, of course, went out of business along with Meade. What impact has that had on eyepiece prices, particularly in that mid-range market that the Sirius eyepieces filled?
That's a good question. I think you can still find some. I just bought an Orion telescope long story, about a month ago. Somebody bought up Orion's inventory, so there's some of that stuff is still out there. So I haven't shopped for an eyepiece in a while. But when I started looking at these prices that I've got up here now compared to this same slide I showed last March, that these prices have gone up by about, I know I didn't do any percentages, but I'm guessing that 138 Plössl last year was something around 100 or less. Okay. So that's the kind of price increases we've seen, at least from Telview's site. Okay. So they are, I'm sure, but there's other people starting to fill in it used to be that Orion was out there and Telview, then Explorer Scientific came around, and there's other people out there selling eyepieces these days. So hopefully that there's enough people trying to fill in the gaps. There used to be University Optics, out of Ann Arbor.
Yeah,
was around for a long time, and unfortunately he's closed up shop. But he didn't obviously manufacture. He had all his stuff came from Japan. He had him manufactured. So, if there's an opening in the market, I'm sure somebody will try and fill in.
Okay, but you're not aware of any, other than the apparent price increases over the past year. You're not aware of what measurable impact the loss of Orion has had.
Yeah, we've had so much inflation in the economy as it is. I mean, again, everybody's prices have gone up, and it's just everybody's on the bandwagon. People have seen opportunities here.
Yeah.
And not opportunities for us.
Yeah, I would say also, Meade also went bust in the whole settlement of that lawsuit. Orion took over Meade, and then they both went out together. But Meade eyepieces were some there were some very high quality eyepieces at a fairly affordable price, like under $200. And some of our favorites in our collection and some of the club's nicest eyepieces are Meads. So, are there any, have you found any? I understand you probably have a lot of eyepieces in your collection already, but are there any sort of up and coming brands that you found trustworthy?
No, I can't say that I have.
Okay.
You know, I'll be honest, quite frankly, my interest has gotten more to taking pictures.
Yeah, that's fair.
You know, but one of the things I found, and we talked about this, as I've aged, my ability to see things through the eyepiece has gotten worse and worse. So I'm relying on the camera to do the work as much as, although it's still enjoy getting out under the stars with an eyepiece and getting a line of, especially kids looking through.
Yeah.
So I had a question that might be a topic of another presentation, but when I put a camera on versus an eyepiece, how does all this change?
Well, obviously, we don't have the optics of the eyepiece involved anymore. So if you're putting the camera at prime focus, it's essentially what's showing up at the field stop in the eyepiece. So that's what you're getting.
Okay, so the camera just focuses on the field stop, and that's where it goes.
Well, there's no field stop anymore. The field stop becomes a dimension of your sensor.
Okay, because the camera doesn't have like a millimeter setting, right? I mean, a millimeter designation, so you don't really know what the
Because you're not. Remember what's happening with the eyepiece is it's taking that beam of light. Let me. I shouldn't have shut the thing down here. Let me bring it up here again. Where's the share button? Okay. Let me. Oh, I got it up there again.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go back. I got to go further back into here. Again, what we're seeing here is, the telescope is bringing whatever object we're looking at. Again, let's just stick with a star along the center line. It comes to focus here, and this would be your field, the chip on your camera, right?
okay.
But
Focusing.
unless you've got if you put go back 100 years ago and put a piece of frosted glass there, then the image will form on that frosted glass.
Okay, so when I'm focusing my camera, I am actually moving this field stop to the sensor.
You're bringing your sensor to the focal point of the telescope.
Okay, I see that now. I was just wondering how all this works if you don't have those, those lenses. That's how that. Okay, well, great.
Now what the eyepiece is doing here again, because now the thing light passes, we get past the focal point. The light cone is now growing bigger again, and the glass in the eyepiece is now recollimating that beam of light. We had a collimated beam coming out, and it was, let's just say it was a 100-millimeter objective lens, right? And now I'm trying to get things down so I can get it into my eyeball, right? So I'd like that new collimated beam to be, 5 millimeters in diameter. So I want to take all the light I gathered at 100 millimeters and get it all jammed into that 5-millimeter collimated beam so that my eye can take it, and then it refocuses it back to the back of your eyeball.
Okay. So there's no meaningful magnification calculation you can make with a camera.
You actually, or we start talking about now what the field of view is. How many arc minutes.
Okay, so that would.
Because essentially the chip is, if you've got an APS-C size camera, you got a 24 by 17 millimeter chip. So that whole field of view now is fit into that small. I mean, think about it. It's only an inch wide by 3/4 of an inch tall, and you wouldn't even want to look at that on a photo, right? So your magnification is going to come later when you print it and blow it up in the print.
All right, thanks. That makes sense. Thanks.
Anything else? Well, once again, thank you for having me. I hope.
Thank you for joining us. Always a pleasure.
Thanks
right.
again, Gordon.
So, our next event will be, other than Jupiter January, tomorrow night at Cranbrook. We will be having our open house on the 4th Saturday of the month up there at Stargate Observatory, and we will see hopefully as many of you as possible at the Cranbrook meeting on the first Monday of February. So, everybody have a good night. Glad nobody has to commute through the snow, and stay warm, people. Clear skies.
Night all.
Good night.
Good night.